welcome to the Tech First Talks podcast.
Thanks, Charles. Great to be here.
So today we're going to talk about security, and security has always been an issue, but with the latest advancements in AI, it's sort of coming to the forefront a bit more, and the number of risks we face is skyrocketing. And I'll be honest, I know I'm not doing everything I should do personally to protect my data, but when I also look at the market, I see how government entities, large corporates, MNCs are diving all in with AI without a properly defined strategy. I don't think they're going to be mitigating those risks either. So the challenge is, I'm not a security expert, but you are. So I'm hoping that you can help me and the audience better understand the current state of the risks we're facing and what we can do to better protect ourselves and our businesses. So why don't we start off by having you tell us a bit about yourself and Vectra, the company that you work for.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so my own name is Adam Basedow, CTO for ANZ at Vectra. Been working in technology for around about 25 years. And over that time, I've worked across systems, infrastructure, managed services, security operations, cyber strategy. I've had both consulting, sales, and technical roles throughout my career. A big part of my recent roles has been designing and building security operations capabilities for customers. Everything from your SOC operating models to the underlying platforms integrate SIEM, SOAR, EDR, response workflows, reporting and governance. So I tend to look at cyber not just as a technology solution, but more of an operating model solution. And our organization, Vectra, is an Australian technology and cybersecurity services provider. We've got customers across Australia and the wider APAC region. We help our customers improve their security posture in a practical way, whether that's through managed SOC services, GRC services, assurance and testing, as well as some incident response. So we're a pure play cybersecurity company. So when I talk about security, I'm usually thinking about the full picture. What are we trying to protect? What can we actually see? How quickly can we detect something meaningful? And when something does happen, who is doing what and how quickly?
Well, it's also good that we start protecting these things. And let's face it, I'm sure your business must be booming right now because there's a few more risks out in the market. But what I want to talk about also is Vectra. I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of your company before we met, but I have heard of the company that you're also part of, which is Ensign InfoSecurity, which is Asia's largest pure play cybersecurity group. I had heard of Ensign when I was based in Singapore. I didn't realize that they're ranked number 7th globally in the MSSP Alert Top 250. So it's basically one of the top in the world for cybersecurity, InfoSecurity. So tell us a bit about this relationship and how it all fits together.
That's been a really exciting evolution for us. Ensign have been an investor of Vectra's for some time now. And being with myself with Vectra for 11 years, I've been part of that journey. And we've continued to grow and mature, but with Ensign's increased investment, we're now part of a much larger organization. As you said, it's fantastic to have those extra skills and capability on board. So Vectra is now an Ensign InfoSecurity company. So for clients, that gives us a really strong model. Vectra provides the local Australian engagement, accountability and customer relationship, while Ensign gives us a global scale across our many 24/7 SOC operations. Add to that our threat intelligence, research, incident response teams, and other specialist cyber capabilities. So customers get the best of both worlds, local teams that know them and easy to work with, backed by one of the most mature cybersecurity groups in the region. And that's important because cyber is global, it's fast moving, doesn't stop after hours. So Ensign gives us the scale and depth to respond to that, while Vectra keeps it practical and local for our customers.
And it's not going to stop after hours anytime soon because now agents are doing it and agents don't sleep. I'm not a security expert, but I can read headlines and they can be a little bit scary at times. Sometimes they come out and they're actually terrifying, which is the one that happened recently, which I just couldn't believe. And that's that Anthropic, it's Mythos AI. They found out that it was able to crack into nearly all of the U.S. National Security Agency systems in a matter of hours, which prompted the U.S. government to order a shutdown of the product. What are we getting ourselves into right now? So how bad is the current threat landscape that we're looking at?
Yeah, well, it's a big challenge and a fair question. And I think the honest answer is it's bad, but I don't think it's hopeless. I think we can certainly make improvements to get ahead of the curve. And the recent Ensign report calls out exactly what we're seeing in the field: more state-sponsored activity, a more mature cyber criminal underground, more supply chain exposure, and of course, AI is starting to accelerate the way attackers operate. And the key word there is accelerate. The threat landscape has changed because the speed has changed. Attackers can now find weaknesses faster, craft better phishing, automate parts of their workflow, and move through environments much more quickly than they used to. And that Anthropic example is confronting because it shows what happens when automation, intelligence, and offensive capabilities start to come together. But for most businesses, the breaches are still coming through very practical gaps: stolen credentials, weak MFA, exposed systems, unpatched software, poor visibility, and slow response. The easier ones to fix, to be honest. So yes, the landscape is more aggressive, but the fundamentals still matter. So we've got to lock down identity, patch what matters, watch the environment properly, and have a response plan that's actually been tested. The businesses that worry me aren't the ones that admit they have gaps. It's the one that assume they're covered because they bought a few tools and they ticked a compliance box.
You mentioned a couple of things there I want to go back to because you talked about the threat landscape report. One thing that caught my eye in there was something I did not understand because you just talked about how they can attack things quicker. But one of the key stats that came out is the average dwell time when someone compromises a system has increased in retail from 5 to 28 days. And I didn't really understand that. So like for a non-technical person like me, what do you mean by dwell time? What happens when someone compromises my system? So what are they doing in there? Or why is that time going up? Why does it matter? And what do they need the extra time for?
Yeah, certainly. Look, there's a few metrics that we use in cybersecurity, and dwell time is one of them. So dwell time is the difference between catching someone rattling on the front door and finding out that they've already been living in your spare room for 6 months. That's dwell time. They've been sitting there undetected. So it's the time an adversary remains undetected within a compromised network, because if they're in your network, it's compromised. And the recent averages are around about 86 days. So that's going up. So the longer that they're sitting in your environment, the longer that they can get their tools together and find different things within valuable systems. So that is the scary bit. It's not always the smash and grab anymore. In a lot of cases, they get in quietly, stay low, learn the environment, find those systems, steal credentials, move laterally, and work out how to cause maximum impact, because that's ultimately what they're there to do. And dwell time is rising because environments are more complex. Identities are harder to manage, and attackers are getting better at blending in. They don't always look like malware anymore. Sometimes they look a legitimate user, logging in from the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. Why does it matter? Because the longer they're in, the more damage they can do. More data stolen, more systems mapped, more accounts compromised, and a much higher chance of ransomware or extortion. So when I see dwell time numbers like 28 days up to 201 days, that tells me one thing: detection and response is still too slow in too many organizations.
It seems like that the bad agents out there are really learning how to leverage the technology faster, and the people who are responsible for it are taking a slower approach. In the last 20 years, I've done hundreds of keynotes. Almost every single one, I'll talk something about security and the risks that we face. And the audience will always talk about, yes, we agree, they all nod, but then they do nothing about it. So why do you think that we as organizations, or us as individuals, do not place a higher value on the security of our data?
Yeah, well, I think the uncomfortable truth is that most people don't really value data until something happens to it. As individuals, we hand over data every day without thinking much about it, as we discussed, before we started this. Who has access to it and how well it's protected? Convenience usually wins. It's easy to upload your data and get the result because I want that information. Organizations are similar. So everyone agrees security is important, but it often competes with revenue, growth, and day-to-day operations. So unless there's a breach, a board question, a customer requirement, or a regulatory body knocking on your door, security can sit in that important but not urgent bucket. So I don't think that organizations don't care. I think that the risk often doesn't feel real enough until it becomes personal or reputational.
Yeah, I think that's the scary thing, because it's just too easy to kick that can down the road and not worry about it until something bad happens, and then everybody freaks out, and the person who was responsible for it gets in trouble, and he can't go back saying, well, you guys were making my life difficult and you valued convenience over security. So that becomes a bit of a challenge. But it seems like now that there's a lot more awareness of this, and you mentioned the key thing there, it's board level now. Security isn't just something that we talk about within IT. I mean, it's at the board level because of all these new risks.
Yeah, definitely. And good security doesn't always create noise. It's there to prevent chaos.
Well, let's talk about this chaos, because a lot of that comes down to AI. And I'm going to talk about a couple of stats here really quick, because I found these, slightly frightening. According to McKinsey, 87% of organizations say that AI vulnerabilities are their fastest growing risk. I think that surprised me because I can't believe 100% don't say that it's that. I think the 13% are just lagging behind. But when Gen AI first came out, we knew that hackers were using it to improve their efficiency. And that was one of the things we saw from some of the Microsoft surveys. And it said that already 32% of all data security incidents involve Gen AI. But now we have Agentic. So, I mean, Gen AI was great because it allowed you to actually talk to a system and it allows you to be much more efficient. Now we have agents, so we don't even have to talk. They can act on their own. So this is going to have a scary impact on the threat landscape. So how do you think that AI has changed this for your customers? And how do you help them address some of these new challenges?
Well, from what I see, organizations start taking cybersecurity seriously when the risk becomes real. Unfortunately, that happens after an incident. So when a similar business gets hit, when a major board customer starts asking tougher questions, or when the board, insurer, or a regulator gets involved, this is where you've got to treat cyber as an operational resilience. So if your systems are down, your data are exposed, or your identity layer is compromised, it's not an IT problem. It becomes a business problem, and it sits at board level.
And this is where it gets scary for those board members because suddenly they're realizing that actually maybe we should have been paying a little bit closer attention to this over all those years, but they haven't. And like I said, no, they have no choice. But that's when you look at it from the wider level. I think the biggest challenge we face is us as humans. So Microsoft also stated that 70% of knowledge workers are bringing their own AI tools to work. So shadow AI, basically. And I'm going to be cheeky here because I was talking to an MNC's chief digital officer a couple of weeks ago, and I told them that I was going to be talking to you, and they wanted me to ask you a specific question about this shadow AI thing. So what happens when an employee uploads a confidential client document into an LLM? And, is it discoverable? Can we really trust them with it? And I'll give you some context. This organization uses Copilot for everything. And they're explicitly not supposed to use any other LLMs, but let's face it, people will do that.
They do.
So
Yeah.
what actually happens to this data, and can we trust these things?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. And the honest answer is it depends on the AI platform, the license, and the settings, obviously, and whether the organization has any control over it. We have a similar sort of problem in our organization. What AI platform can you govern? And yeah, Copilot's an easy one because, we're using Office 365, so we know where the data is. We know it's connected to Entra and all of that, our authority from that point of view. But from a risk point of view, once a confidential client document is uploaded into an unmanaged public AI tool, you should really just assume control has been lost because it may be stored in chat history, retained in logs, processed by the provider, reviewed for abuse monitoring, or potentially used to improve services depending on the platform. But some enterprise AI platforms give you stronger controls around data retention, privacy, audit, and non-training commitments. But that's very different from an employee using a free consumer AI tool on their own. So the issue isn't just will the model remember it forever. The real issue is where did that document go? Who can now access it? How long is it retained? Can you delete it? That's why shadow AI is such a problem. It creates an invisible data movement. Sensitive information can leave the organization without going through email, file sharing, DLP. The advice is pretty simple, but don't just block AI. You've got to govern it. Because if you do give staff approved tools, clear rules, and data classification, if you don't give people a safe path, they'll create their own, and that's just what's going to happen. And you mentioned Microsoft Copilot. If you're sort of using Copilot, as I said, you do have a little bit more of a controlled environment. You've got enterprise identity and permissions and compliance controls. Doesn't remove the risk completely because, you've still got the shadow AI side door. People can still use their personal machines and personal AI and all of those sorts of things. It is a problem.
I think eventually we're going to have to start adapting all the NDAs to say that you cannot share any of my documents into an LLM because I think these things are just getting out there. And the big challenge for something like when I look at this is, so basically people are going to use them anyway, even if we tell them not to. But in theory, you should be able to go out there into one of these LLMs and set up your settings so that data is kept confidential or private. But then what we're doing is saying we're trusting employees who are already breaching our corporate policies to then go out there and, be very thorough in the way they set their settings. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I just think this level of shadow AI risk is going to keep exploding.
Yeah, definitely. That's where shadow AI does get messy. The issue isn't whether one particular LLM is good or bad. It's that the organization has lost visibility and lost that control. You don't know what was uploaded, what account was used, what settings were enabled, what terms are applied. So the risk is less about trusting AI. It's more about trusting an unmanaged process. So as I said, make the path easy, give them guidance into good systems and good posture around using good tools, and help them understand that it could put the organization at risk. And ultimately, that's their employer. And that's if you want a job, well, what the outcome of that is.
But we also know that people do value convenience, so they'll always break the rules when they can. We've talked a lot about how bad actors are leveraging it, but actually, it can actually be good to help protect against the bad actors as well. So I know that you guys just built out the first Agentic SOC, so Security Operations Center in Asia Pac. Someone who's technical will understand the Security Operations Center. I'm not that technical. So what is a SOC and why is it needed? And how do you leverage Agentic to help run that SOC?
Awesome. I love this sort of side of things because it's really my bread and butter. So a SOC is obviously a Security Operations Center. It's the team and capability that monitors an organization. They're looking for signs of cyber threat, investigate suspicious activity, when responding when something looks wrong. They might be that center where they talk to their clients and the clients aren't quite sure about what's going on. So you can leverage your SOC to give you that level of intelligence. But the important bit, I think, for me is the correlation. So one event on its own, and the tools we use to bring hundreds of thousands of events per day into a system, one event on its own might not mean much. It might be a strange login, might be a blocked process, a user accessing a new system. But when you bring those signals together through tools like EDR, SIEM, and SOAR, patterns start to appear. So that's where a SOC can detect those real threats, cut through the noise. So we're getting actionable alerts rather than lots of different independent alerts. So we're responding before a small issue becomes a major incident. And the agentic AI in the SOC, so this is the fun bit, and definitely I would have to say the most discussed topic of 2026, in my space at least. Agentic AI really changes the SOC from being purely human-driven to human-led. And to say that again, human-driven and human-led. So we don't really want SOC to be completely autonomous. We want to be able to use tools so those humans can make intelligent machine-assisted decisions at speed. So in a traditional SOC, analysts spend a lot of time collecting evidence, checking logs, enriching alerts, looking up threat intel, summarize findings, and all, so on and so forth. Agentic AI can help automate a lot of that workflow. So it can investigate across systems, correlate signals, build a timeline, and then recommend next actions and trigger approved response steps through a SOAR. It might do the first 5 things of an investigation for a potential incident. It's going to then trigger an approved response for the analyst to say, okay, what's the next step? I need you to physically approve this or decline it. But the point is it doesn't replace the SOC, so it accelerates, and that's what we're trying to do. We've got hackers that are using AI, as we talked about earlier. We're looking to accelerate at speed. So humans are still setting the rules. We're approving critical actions. We're validating outcomes and rendering judgment. But agentic AI gives you the SOC speed and scale. The analysts bring context and accountability.
I do like the idea of the human in the loops. You talk about how it's human-led, because I do think it's kind of scary about a future where the hackers are just going to be using agents, and then the firms are just going to be doing agents. So it's going to be agent versus agent going back and forth. There was a story I heard about recently where a marketing firm created an agent to create marketing campaigns, but it was very good. So it created way too many marketing campaigns. So it created another agent to basically vet those and only select the best ones. And the two agents were able to work together, obviously not planning it this way, but just because they're both trying to reach their own objectives. They worked together. Every one of the ones they were creating still was able to meet the requirements, but then they still produced tons of them. I get nervous if it's just agents working with agents, because I think that you need to have that human in the loop, especially when it comes to something like security, because I hate to see the results of where it comes out otherwise.
Controlled chaos, yeah.
Yeah. Now let's talk about this chaos again, though, and how it's coming back and impacting like corporates. If I'm inside a large organization and I hear that we've been hacked, what actually happens? Like, so when somebody identifies a vulnerability through the SOC or whatever, what happens over that next 24 to 72 hours? I mean, like, what have they been doing? What happens? Like, how do you defend against it? What are the hackers doing, and how do we stop them? What's that process?
Yeah, it's not a pretty area to be in, particularly when you're talking about large organizations. The first 72 hours, as I said, are controlled chaos. And like any crime scene, the priority is to slow the bleeding, preserve the evidence, and get the business operating safely again. So in the first few hours, you need to confirm what's happened, isolate systems, disable compromised accounts, protect backups, and get the right people in the room. So IT,
Mhm.
security, legal, comms, executives, and your incident response team. Don't just start wiping machines because you can destroy evidence and obviously make it harder to understand what the root cause was. So from there, it becomes quite a structured process. Contain the attack, work out how they got in, understand what data or systems are affected, communicate carefully, restore from clean backups, monitor aggressively in case the attacker still has a foothold.
Mhm.
And the biggest lesson in this is recovery is not just a technical exercise; it's a business continuity event. The companies that can recover well are the ones that already know who makes the decisions, who talks to customers, who talks to the regulators, where the backups are, and what matters most. And the obvious one is test your incident response plan, because if you don't know what you're doing, and the worst time to be able to test your incident response plan is when you actually need it.
So I think the other challenge that a lot of these organizations face, especially for the non-technical C-suite and board members, is now that IT security has come to the forefront, they're all thinking, okay, well, we need global top-notch CISO to come in here and protect our organization. Problem is, a lot of companies can't afford those, and there's not that many out there. And then also, how do you actually hire for something like that? Because if I need somebody who can protect a large MNC, the people evaluating them probably aren't going to be smart enough to understand all the security vulnerabilities. What do you recommend to organizations when they're in this situation? How do you actually protect this? Who do you hire to help you do
Mm.
this?
Yeah, when we come up against this question quite a lot, because yeah, you're completely right. It's not always affordable for smaller organizations or even medium-sized organizations to have a dedicated CISO. So the reality is that it's something that's required. So you need CISO level governance, but you may not need or be able to afford one, as I said.
Mm.
So that's where an outsourced or virtual CISO can become effective. It gives the businesses access to a CISO function, more affordable. You still got your security strategy and your governance and your risk management, board reporting, and all the things that a normal CISO is going to do. The point is, just don't get stuck down on the job title. I need to have a CISO. What matters is that someone owns the security direction, understanding the business risk, and keep the organization moving. You may not need a full-time CISO, but you absolutely need the function.
And now, do you see that companies are a lot more willing to engage and to be honest, and to pay for this now? Because before they'd ignored security. We talked about some of the challenges before, where we don't want to lock everything down because then people won't use it, or we just want to roll out a proof of concept. We don't need to worry about security yet. But then pricing, well, I don't want to pay for all the security. What's the chance of somebody hacking my system? It seems like the whole perception of security has changed, and now a lot of people who are concerned about security aren't from security or even technology. How is that like changing the way your clients are approaching? I'm guessing it has to be a lot easier to get in the front door now. But I mean, how is it dealing with a lot of these business people in a security landscape?
It's certainly changed the conversation probably in the last 18 months. We've sort of seen AI poke its head out and people starting to adopt it. Historically, a lot of security conversations were about infrastructure and endpoints and email identity and compliance. Now we're being pulled into AI strategy conversations because people are asking what, AI tools are being used. As we talked about before, how do you control shadow AI? How do you stop sensitive data leakage? And how do we test whether these systems can be manipulated? So we're talking more about AI security controls, AI guardrails, data governance, prompt injection testing. So
Mhm.
being able to try to bypass a chat bot, trying to get information that it shouldn't give me, access controls, monitoring, acceptable use. So it's no longer, whether are we using AI? The better question is, where is AI being used and what can it touch and what could go wrong?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And what I want to look at is how bad things can get. And I'm afraid to ask this question because I'm afraid it's going to keep me up at night when I start realizing this. But
Mhm.
can you give me an example of a company? You don't have to name it specifically if you'd like to keep it anonymous, that really made a mess of their organizational security and how maybe a bad actor was able to use AI to gain access. What is the worst case scenarios of things that can actually happen to organizations and what are the
Yeah.
impacts?
Yeah, good one. I think then this example that I've got is not where the organization made I guess it was just very early on. So AirUp they're an engineering firm. So this wasn't really a classic breach where someone hacked through the firewall. It was a hell of a lot more confronting than that. Attackers actually used AI generated deep fakes to impersonate senior executives on a video call. And they convinced an employee to transfer around 25 million US. So the system they hacked wasn't really a system. They were hacking trust of the person. So that person trusted that the person on the other end was exactly who they saw. So that's the scary shift with AI. It can make fraud feel legitimate. The email looks right, the voice sounds right, the video looks right, the urgency feels real. So the impact for AirUp was significant financially, but the broader reputational impact is just as important because every organization that has to then ask, could our people, our process or our approval controls withstand that? The lesson is that security isn't about stopping malware anymore. It's about verifying decisions and slowing things down, making sure payments and access requests and identity, are legitimate. So especially when something's not, feeling a bit urgent or a bit unusual, you maybe just ask the question. I'm not sure if I could be able to pick an AI talking to me. I don't even know if this is you talking to me. Maybe it's someone else,
I've
you know?
always been known as a bot. Yeah. So I just, yeah, I just basically picked this persona. This is my avatar face. So
Yeah.
now that's frightening. 'Cause if you think about it, it's only been in the last couple of years we've had that capability to make those quality deepfakes. And we've already progressed to that level where they were able to fake that they were senior execs. So I think that won't be the only example we hear like from that type of a thing with the deepfake, encouraging people to transfer money. But I think it's scary. What do you tell organizations? How do you protect against something like that?
Well, exactly. Well, actually, that's a very good question. And I was just thinking about it then. Ensign Labs developed a tool to be able to detect deep fake. So if you have a look on their website, it's actually quite interesting what they're doing in their research division to be able to understand when the person on the other end is not who they say they are. And especially if you're talking, things like politics or where that really matters. And that could, present a real security vulnerability for national security. That's going to be a big one, I think, and they're going to continue to get worse.
I'm kind of hoping somebody comes out and saying everything I've been reading in the news the past decade from certain world leaders was all deepfake and nobody would actually say those crazy things. But
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, if
real world.
if you're pretending to be the president, you're saying all these different things and you're talking to head of security, yeah, very important.
So what we're really talking about is almost like two-factor authentication for human interactions now. And before we used to have to do it for banking, but it's like if I'm talking to you, is there like some kind of a two-factor authentication we're going to get to?
Yeah, just about. I think that's a good point. We almost do need something like that, whether it's a biometric or whatever it is. But even biometrics can be cloned these days. So we're just going to have to keep on evolving.
So now we're going to switch into something that I like to do, which is more like the quick fire round where I basically get to ask a lot of crazy questions that I'm curious about because I'm selfish and I like to learn about
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things. But I normally call it a quick fire round, but today we're going to call it the idiot's guide to infosecurity because I'm definitely an idiot on this stuff. And I'm just curious about how, screwed we potentially could be in this world with all the new AI risks we face. So let's start off with just a reality check. On a scale of 1 to 10, just how scared should we be about the latest wave of AI security risks? And to give you a benchmark, let's say that in the pre-Gen AI area, we were at a 5.
Yeah, I'd have to say 7 or 8. I don't think that's panic mode, but definitely pay attention mode. AI is not replacing the old risks, but it's making it faster, cheaper, and more believable and easier to scale.
That's good because on a scale of 1 to 10, I thought it would be about 25. The next question on this one, let's be honest, is the biggest risk that we face for security in organizations just us coming in right now with shadow AI and not paying attention and not understanding if somebody's a real person or a deepfake?
Yes, but it's not always fair to blame the user. So people can make mistakes and people can click on things, but the real issue is when organizations are relying on perfect human behavior instead of building controls that assume people will click the wrong thing occasionally, because we still need to train the users.
And I think what we also discussed earlier is it's so hard now to tell, like, how do you get mad at that person when the deepfake was so good? Yes, they got tricked, but it's so easy to trick people nowadays.
It's getting harder and harder. We're having to test more and more, and the tests are getting harder and harder. We're having to do it all the time. And people are still failing.
So the vast majority of people who will be listening in will have used ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or DeepSeek for a personal account and used it for work purposes. How bad is that really?
Depends what they put into it. Using AI to clean up wording or brainstorming ideas is one thing, but uploading client data, financial contracts, source code, credentials, or other internal strategy, that's where it becomes risky. So the rule is pretty simple. Don't put anything into a public or personal AI tool that you wouldn't be comfortable emailing outside of the business. I think that's the guideline I go by.
I keep hearing about all these people that I know who are more on the sales side that are having the LLMs, like before company policies were in place, the LLMs are writing their proposals for them. And I'm like, do you think you should be sticking all that information in there? There might be a few risks associated with that.
Well, yeah, that's right. It was too early to even think about, what is actually going to happen here? Where does this information go? Who's looking at it? Where it's being stored?
Well, let's bring it back to the personal level then to help people understand this, because I actually want to understand it as well. So let's say I upload my medical information or my financial information into an LLM so it can analyze it. What actually happens to that data and what risks would I be exposing myself to?
You're handling over sensitive data to a third party where it could be stored and logged, potentially reviewed by someone. It's difficult to fully delete. So it might be, as I said, personal to you. So the risk is loss of control over some of your most personal information. And we don't know what the people on the other side are using it for, or whether they're selling that data to gain financial benefit. That's probably the biggest risk, I think.
So a lot of this revolves around trust. And if we're looking at some of these LLMs, they might say that, yes, you can click this security feature and then your data will never be shared with anyone. But that's a human doing it. Do we run the risk of an agent coming in there and figuring out, actually, that's useful information and I don't care about that policy? So could they create these new problems going forward?
I believe so. It comes down to then the organization being responsible for that. That's potentially a breach. If they're operating an agent that's doing something that is outside the parameters of what you are telling your customers that it's doing, well, I guess that would be a potential lawsuit for someone that's claiming that it's got access to something that they said that it didn't.
So the next thing I want to do is talk about concentration risk. And we had talked about this earlier when the US government ordered Mythos to be pulled down and not shared anymore. But the thing is, some companies use these AI tools to help manage their security. What is the risk if you have all your eggs in one basket?
It's concentration risk, as you just mentioned. It's the whole security operation, depending on one AI model or one vendor, then their outage, policy change, pricing, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to start using AI and we're going to rely on it. Pricing is actually going to go up. It's what we're seeing. There might be a breach or it might be a government restriction that becomes your operational problem overnight. So define the process and not the platform you're using. That's my advice.
Now I want to look at the governance of this. People who are not technical are now suddenly concerned about security, which is good for business in general because you want people to be more concerned about it. But a lot of times they don't understand it. So you probably walk into a lot of meetings where normally it would just be a technical or security person on the other side of the table. Now you get people who are business people who are concerned. How do you make them relate to the real challenges that we face right now in cybersecurity?
Well, I guess you could imagine, tomorrow morning you walk into your boardroom and your payroll system's down or your CRM's down, your finance systems are offline, your customer data may be leaked. The next thing you're going to hear is the media calling for comment, and depending on the size of your organization, who's actually owning that? So that's cyber risk. It's not really an IT problem anymore. So it's more of a business resilience problem. And that comes down to the directors of the business and the board actually owning that problem.
I think this is why I get nervous about doing podcasts on security, because the more I learn about this, the more I freak out about the potential risks we face going forward. Let's look at it from more the human side of security right now. And let's figure out how it's impacting us. Without naming names, what's a security incident that you've seen in the last couple of years that really stuck with you where you thought, wow, that's done a lot of damage to an individual or individuals or a company, and it really should have been prevented?
Not an incident we managed, I'll just disclose that, but a major online facility. I could mention them. Everyone would know them. The attacker didn't happen by some Hollywood-style hack. They used MFA fatigue. So MFA fatigue is repeatedly pushing login approvals until someone accepts. So basically what happens is the administrator was getting a multi-factor authentication push. It might have been at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They were getting so annoyed with it in the end, they just accepted it. That allowed them in. So the lesson is MFA is critical, but if it's poorly implemented or the staff aren't trained correctly, attackers can turn the control itself into an attack path.
And again, this will help keep me up at night because it's just down to humans again. So we can always screw
Yes,
up the process,
I'm
even
down to
if we have
humans.
human
Exactly.
oversight.
Mm.
Oh boy. All right. So you've spent your career helping clients address their security challenges. It's safe to say you know this industry better than most people. What keeps you up at night? Because I know what's keeping me up right now with these things. Like, what are the things that really worry you about the future with us?
I would say identity compromise combined with poor visibility. So if an attacker gets valid credentials, they can really just do whatever they like because they can bypass or abuse MFA and start operating like a normal user. So a lot of organizations won't see it quickly enough. And by the time they do, the damage is already done. So too many admins. So we want to employ the notion of, least privilege. So your users should have the minimum privileges required to do their jobs, no more. For example, as a CTO, I have zero admin access. I just don't need it. And that's how we want to operate as a company.
I think this idea of identity risk is huge. And I think it's funny because if you watch like a TV show from 10 years ago and you see some crime drama or something, they might clone somebody's identity and it was, oh, they can really do that. And now it's kind of like, yeah, of course they can do that. All that data is out there. It's pretty simple. So it's got to
That's
change
right.
the way we
Yeah.
do programming, I think, going forward. So what's one thing that's happened in cybersecurity in the last 12 months that every ordinary person wouldn't really know about, but probably should be aware of?
I think people are still underestimating email. Despite all the new AI threats, malicious email remains one of the easiest ways into an organization. And if you think about even our personal lives, we're getting so many emails these days. We're getting SMSs. We've got a link. It actually looks quite legitimate. It's got an attachment. It's got a fake login page. It looks like it's Microsoft. And a malware payload can be all it takes just by clicking that link. Something flashes in the corner and you're not quite sure. And then we go back to dwell time. Someone sits in your environment for 100 days or more, watching you type all your passwords in and watching you putting your account details in. They've got all that data, and then now they go away and do their business. It might take 6 to 12 months before you realize that something's actually happened.
I think as soon as this is done, I'm basically going to do a massive cleanup on my computer right now and run some diagnostics to make sure everything's running okay.
Yeah.
So final question on this one. What should every person who's watching this or listening in do differently on your phones or your laptops starting today? And I'm going to start this in about 10 minutes when we're done.
I think multi-factor authentication is an easy one. Everyone knows about it. It should be on every system, not SMS if you can avoid it. SMS can be intercepted. So using the one-time pad and using a password manager with unique passwords. I think I've got thousands of different passwords. So I've got one really secure password, longer the better. So at least, 30 characters. It could be a passphrase. It could be, I like to go to the beach on a Sunday. The longer the better. And in that password manager, I've got all of my passwords stored in there. So when then I go onto a website, it can inject that password into the login rather than me having to type it out. So if someone's looking over my shoulder, they can't see me typing in my password. I tell a story when I was a kid working in school, and the IT department manager could never work out how I got into the system, but it was just me looking over his shoulder, watching him type it in. And every couple of days I'd get a few more digits, and then eventually I got the password. It's just called shoulder surfing. It's the easiest one of the lot.
Okay, great. So I'm going to now change all my passwords to 30 plus characters and see if I can remember any of those. So
Well, you don't have to change them all to 30 plus characters. You have your one that's really long,
yeah.
and then the password vault manages all of those characters yourself. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know all my passwords. If you ask me what my banking password was, I can't tell you. It's a whole heap of characters and numbers that I have no idea what it is because my password manages that. I know my vault password. That's all I need. And then I've got two-factor authentication to get into my vault. And I've also got notification on my phone to say someone's logged into it. Every single time, it'll send me a text and an email to say someone's logged into it.
Okay, I'm going to have to look up my passwords after this. Adam, thanks so much for taking the time today, and happy birthday once again. So it's time to go and celebrate your birthday. And thanks for scaring the living hell out of me about the security threats we face, but at least letting me know there's things that we can do to manage this better.
Thank you, Charles. A pleasure to be on your show, and look forward to discussing it further with many other people in the industry.
Yeah, and hopefully there's not too many bad examples coming up, but I'm sure there will be some that'll keep this interesting.
There always will be. It's
Interesting for us.
just a guaranteed thing, right? It's death and taxes. You always know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So do the right things and keep yourself protected and your security posture resilient.
All right. Thanks again, and have a great night, and enjoy your birthday.
Thank you.